my dear viewers, welcome to Mathman Videos. I hope you are doing great. The topic of today's video lecture is from Class 7 English NCERT textbook. We are going to discuss the first chapter, which is a short story, The Three Questions, by a famous author, Leo Tolstoy. Before we get into the summary of the short story, we shall quickly understand the life and works of the famous author. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Leo Tolstoy was a Russian novelist, thinker, short story writer, and an essayist. He is regarded as one of the greatest authors of all time because of his exceptional and enlightening writing skills. Tolstoy's writings are of various genres ranging from realistic, moral, philosophical, religious, and political ones. Some of his notable works that I remember are War and Peace, Anna Karenina, Confession, Resurrection, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, The Kingdom of God is Within You, Haji Murad, etc. Tolstoy was born into an aristocratic family on 9th of September 1828 in a place called Polyana, Russian Empire. He was the fourth of 5 children in the family. His mother passed away when he was 2 years old, and his father too passed away when he was 9 years. He was therefore raised by the relatives in the family. Tolstoy's early schooling happened at home, but he showed quite a little interest towards his study. At the age of 16, Tolstoy attended Kazan University, where he pursued a law course and wanted to study Oriental languages, but because of the fact that he was a terrible student, his teachers described him as someone who is both unable and unwilling to learn. He therefore had to stop his studies in the middle and had to walk out of the university without any degree. Shortly after leaving the university, Tolstoy decided to spend his rest of the teenage and early adulthood in a leisurely manner. It was at this point he began writing. His first work was an autobiography titled as Childhood, which was published in 1852. After spending a few years in leisure, he found himself stuck in debts due to gambling. He therefore accompanied his brother to join army. After rigorous training, Tolstoy served as an artillery officer during the Crimean War. Artillery officer is someone who handles the operations related to weapons. And Crimean War was the greatest war fought between Russia and Ottoman Empire, which is now known as Turkey. Due to his bravery at the war front, he quickly rose to a superior position of a lieutenant, but the countless number of deaths and the amount of bloodshed had devastated and horrified Tolstoy to an extent that he chose to quit the army as soon as the war came to an end. When the war came to an end, Tolstoy left the army and set out for his European trip to Paris. There in Paris, he witnessed one of the worst and horrible ways of public execution, where people were decapitated and beheaded by the government as a means of capital punishment. Now, this experience had left quite a traumatic impact on Tolstoy. He thus developed a deep sense of hatred towards the concept of government in general, which could be seen in his later essays. The two events, that is the Crimean War and his experience in Paris, had changed Tolstoy's personality. From an aristocratic man, he became an anarchist Anarchist is the one who doesn't believe in the concept of government. He thus followed the path of peace and non-violence and inspired millions of people across the world, including Mahatma Gandhi. It was only after the death of his brother that Tolstoy felt a desire to start a family. He therefore married a lady named Sophia, who was 16 years younger to him, and the couple had 13 children, out of whom only 8 could survive to adulthood. Now, Tolstoy's writing career flourished and reached to great success in a short span of time. He was earning huge amounts of royalty from his works, and during his later years, he began excessively spiritual and began to seek answers for the deeper spiritual questions in life. He believed in serving mankind and also began to have extreme political and religious views. He spent his entire wealth in helping the poor people. He founded 13 schools for the children of Russian peasants. Because of the fact that he was excessively spending on the public welfare rather than on his own family, conflicts began to arise in his marriage. Tolstoy's relations with his wife deteriorated soon and the couple parted ways. Shortly after separating from his wife, Tolstoy gave up his aristocratic lifestyle and resorted to a more simplistic and spiritual life. On a cold winter day of 20th September 1910, Tolstoy collapsed at a railway station and passed away due to pneumonia at the age of 82. One of the lesser known facts about Tolstoy is that he was nominated for Nobel Prize every year from 1902 to 1906. Not only this, he was also nominated for Nobel Peace Prize in the years 1901, 1902 and 1909. But the fact that he could win neither of the two awards remains a controversy. So that was all about the wonderful author Leo Tolstoy. I think now it's time to understand this beautiful and insightful short story, The 3 Questions. We shall understand its summary instead of reading the entire text. Now, The 3 Questions is a 1903 short story written by the Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy. The story takes the form of a parable. When I say parable, I refer to a story that has a moral value or something to teach us. Therefore, this is a short story of a king who is in a quest to find out answers to 3 of his questions. It also covers different themes such as wisdom, forgiveness and acceptance. Many years ago, there was a king who had 3 questions on his mind, and the questions were: what is the proper time to begin something? Who are the most important people he should listen to? And what is the most important thing for him to do? Now, the king thought that if he knew the answers to these 3 questions, not only would he be enlightened, he would also be able to rule his kingdom efficiently and would never fail in his life. He therefore decided to send one of his messengers to find out the people who have answers to these 3 questions, and also tells that whoever manages to satisfy the king would be rewarded with a huge sum of money. When the king's messenger announces about the same across the kingdom, many wise men come forward and present various suggestions. To the king's first question, some of them suggest that in order to know the proper time to begin something, the king should probably prepare a timetable and abide by it. While others tell that it is impossible for a single person to know what is the right time to begin something. Therefore, the king should probably form a council of ministers and take suggestions from them as to what is the proper time to begin an action. While many others suggested that it is practically impossible to anticipate what is the right time because we cannot look into the future, it is only possible with the help of magicians. Only magicians are capable of knowing the proper time. Therefore, the king should ask the magicians. To his second question, people suggested that the king should listen to his counselors as they are the most important people, while many others suggested that the king should listen to doctors, soldiers, and priests. To the third and last question of the king, the scholars gave importance to science and religious worship. Now, because the answers were varied, the king was not satisfied with the answers and thus rewarded nobody. The king decided to seek the answers himself. He therefore plans to visit a hermit who lives in a nearby village. A hermit refers to a man who lives alone and leads a life of simplicity, basically a saint or a monk. So the king here visits the hermit all alone. When he goes by the hut of that hermit, who is an old man, the king finds out that the hermit is digging the ground. The king respectfully greets the hermit and requests him to provide answers to the three of his questions. The hermit listens to the questions but remains silent. He doesn't answer to any of the three questions, but continues digging the ground. After a while, the king notices that the hermit is exhausted by the digging because he was old. So the king offers to help the hermit. He takes the spade from the hermit's hand and he starts digging. Now the king continues digging the ground until it was evening. When the sun was set and when the king was completely exhausted, the king once again requests the hermit to provide answers to three of his questions. And this time too, the hermit remains silent. Shortly afterwards, the hermit points out at a bearded man who had a very large injury in his stomach and was bleeding profusely. When the king looks at the bearded man, he sees that the bearded man was running towards the two men, that is the hermit and the king. So the king rushes to the bearded man, he washes his wound and ties a cloth around his belly to stop the blood flow. And with the help of hermit, the king lifts the man and lays him on bed. Now because the hermit and the king both were tired by the digging, they fall asleep for the night. The next day when the king wakes up, he finds that this bearded man is standing next to him and apologizing for something. Now the king asks the reason behind his guilt. Then the bearded man replies saying that he was actually the king's enemy and was out to seek revenge from the king who had killed his brother earlier. But his plan failed when the king's soldiers found out and attacked him. He expresses gratitude towards the king and says had the king not helped him, he wouldn't have been alive. He also tells the king that he would remain the loyal servant and serve the king for the rest of his life. Now the king calmly listens to it, he accepts the apology and provides assistance to the bearded man. When the king decides to leave the hermit, he therefore asks the hermit for one last time to provide answers to the three of his questions. The hermit answers this time. The hermit says that the king's questions have already been answered. When the king asks how, the hermit replies, when the king stopped by the previous day to help the hermit in digging the ground, it was a proper time when he stopped, because had he not stopped, what would have happened? The king would have left and his enemy would have followed him and stabbed him to death. Therefore, the time that saved his life was the proper time. The hermit again explains that the most important person for the king in that moment was the hermit himself. And finally, the hermit says that helping the hermit was the most important and good deed that the king did. Therefore, we can summarize that the proper time to begin something is now, which is the present. Because it is only in the present we have the power to act. Future is uncertain, therefore we don't have any power over the future. The most important people are the people who we are with, because we don't know who stays with us in the future and who betrays us. Therefore, we have to value and cherish the ones who are with us in the present. And lastly, the most important thing to do is to do good deeds. Human beings are sent into this world in order to do good. That brings us to the end of this wonderful, insightful short story. I hope you understood it, and if you enjoyed listening to the video, do not forget to like, share and subscribe. I shall be back with another new topic. Until then, goodbye, take care.